Welcome to another Blue Bear Quilts tutorial. In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can make 4 perfectly trimmed flying geese units from one large piece of fabric and 4 small squares. How are we going to accomplish this? We're going to be using the wing clipper tool by Studio 180 Design. So stay tuned and I'll show you how we're going to accomplish this. Here are the tools that you're going to need in order to make the flying geese units with the Studio 180 wing clipper. So of course you're going to need a Studio 180 wing clipper tool, and you'll need the wing clipper instructions. You're going to need a straight edge ruler, a rotary cutter. You'll need a large piece of geese fabric and 4 small squares of sky fabric. Now the wing clipper tool doesn't have any grit or sandpaper like surface on the back, so you can see I've applied these 2 pieces of tape that are textured, and when I put those on it holds that ruler in place nice and firm, so that's why I did that. And what I did to accomplish that is I used this Next Care, which is actually medical tape made by 3M, and it comes in these little rolls just like tape would, but it's textured on one side, and you just peel off the amount you need and stick it on the back of the ruler, and now it gives it a nice textured surface. So if you have any rulers that you'd like to put a textured surface on the back, this Next Care tape is a really great trick for doing that. So once we have our supplies all lined up, the instructions tell us right here what size large squares to cut and what size small squares to cut. And then the first thing that we need to do is take 2 of the squares, and we're going to line them up like this, and they're supposed to not actually go right into the corner. You're supposed to leave like a thread of the bottom fabric exposed on both ends. So if I move this up, you can see that I have a little bit of the white showing around there and on the top, and the same thing down here. There's a tiny little bit of white showing. Maybe I can zoom in to show that to you. Can you see how there's like a little edge of the white still showing there? And also up here at the top there's a little bit of the white showing, and that's what you want. Then the next thing that you're supposed to do is you're supposed to draw a diagonal line and then a sewing line on either side of that. But in order to eliminate that step, I'm going to take and put pins in this fabric and then cut and then sew. And I'll show you that, how I do that. So you can see that I've placed 2 pins on either side, and we're going to be cutting right here, so you want to be careful to not get your pins in too close to where you're cutting. And now I'm going to put a couple down here as well. And what these are doing is they're just going to hold the fabric in place until I can get it sewn. Sometimes this little fingernail method works for pinning, and then sometimes it doesn't. So there we go. I've got the top square pinned and I've got the bottom square pinned. And you were to take the 2 fabrics, the large flying geese fabric and the background sky fabrics, and put them right sides together. So these squares are right sides together on top of this large flying geese. So then in order to cut diagonally on these pieces, I'm going to line them up with a line on my ruler. You can see there's a line up there, and then I'm going to follow that line That is the 23rd line, and this is the 23rd line here. So I'm going to follow that line down to here. So I'm placing this corner and this corner right on a line on the mat. And that will give me a good way for cutting this diagonally. So now I'm going to take my regular straight edge ruler and put it so that it's going to cut right on that line. And there we go. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch along these edges that I just cut. And I think you know how to sew, so I'm not going to show you how to do that, but I'll do that and then I'll come back and show you the next steps. So now you can see I've sewn with a nice 1/4 inch along that line. The same thing on this one. And then you take and you press it, press it and then press it towards the sky fabrics. And you see that you end up with these two shapes that look like hearts. So the next thing that's going to be done is we take and now place a square down here like this, and up here in the corner, and the same thing again of that we want to leave like a little sliver of fabric showing. Can you see how I have just like the tiniest little bit of white showing on either side? And I'm going to take and pin this now because I'm going to be cutting along there, and again sewing on both sides. And I'll do the same thing to the other one. Take this and place it right here. And again, leave a tiny little bit of white showing, and the same thing on the bottom. Tiny little bit of white showing on the bottom there and there. And we're going to take and pin this in place. And pin this one over here in place. Okay. Then once again we're going to take and line this point right here and this point down here. The one up here at the top and the one down here at the bottom are lined up on a line on the ruler, or on the mat. Then I take my straight edge ruler and put it on that line. And make that cut. So then I end up with two pieces that look like this. I'm going to do the same thing to this one. Once again, I'm going to take it and line it up on a line on the mat. Both the top point and the bottom point. Then take my straight edge ruler, put it on the lines of the mat. And cut that right down the center like that. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch along here and along here. And the same thing on this one. I'm going to stitch along there and along here. And then I'm going to press them away from the white goose fabric again. I'll go sew them and then I'll show you what that looks like. So when you sew that other side onto the piece with a 1/4 inch, like that, and press it, you end up with units that look like this. Now you say to yourself, those look pretty good. We should be done. And you're also probably saying, I thought you said we were going to use the wing clipper tool. You haven't even used it yet. So yes, now we're going to use it. and it's going to be used to trim up these blocks. These are supposed to be 3x6 finished blocks, and so unfinished they're going to be 3.5 by 6.5, and so those measurements will guide you in doing this. So here's our 3.5 inch line there, and here's our 6.5. So we want to make sure that both of those lines are within this unit when we trim up this first side. And then we're going to line up this diagonal line along the seam there, and we're going to line up this one over here so that we're basically matching that V right there, and we're still within the 3.5 inch line over here and within the 6.5 inch line over here. So this looks pretty good. So we're going to take and trim off this first side. And you can see we're not trimming very much off. And then we take and we flip this 180 degrees. Now I'm left-handed, so the instructions tell how to do it for a right-handed person. For a right-handed person, you're actually going to put the block like this. But since I'm left-handed, this is how I do it. But the wing clipper instructions do tell you how to do it for a right-handed person. It's the same concept. It's just this ruler is situated differently and the piece is situated differently. So now we've already trimmed up this side and this side. So we're going to be using that 3.5 and 6.5 inch line as our marks for trimming up the other side. So there's 3.5, and we want to make sure that it's lined up right along that edge. And here's 6.5. We want to make sure that's lined up right along that edge. And then this little X right here should be in that corner again, and it is. So I'm just going to make sure that this is slightly over like that. And that's slightly like that. That looks pretty good. And we're going to trim up the other two sides. So there's that side, and here's this side. And that gives you a perfectly trimmed up 3.5 by 6.5 flying geese unit. So let me do that for you one more time. We start with it in this position with the long part of the geese on my left hand side. The wing clipper ruler is with the wing clipper upside down. And again, we're paying attention to the 3.5 inch line and the 6.5 and making sure that those lines are contained within our block. And then this is going to be the intersection that we want to go in that little point. So we run this one along there and this one along here. And sometimes they're not perfect. Like you'll notice this side's pretty good. There's a little bit that's kind of sticking out on this side. And that happens sometimes. So then you just kind of like give it the best approximation that you can. And that will be good enough because it's still going to be 3.5 by 6.5. And then we trim off these two sides. And this side up here. Then we take and we flip the block 180 degrees. And now we're going to use those 3.5 inch and the 6.5 inch lines. And this ruler will go all the way from 1 inch to 1.5 inch up to 5.5 by 10.5. So you could do a flying geese unit as big as 5 by 10 with this particular ruler. And I do believe they have wing clippers that are for larger sizes as well. So I'm making sure that this 6.5 is lined up on the line and the 3.5 is lined up on this side. That looks good. And we're going to trim up these final two sides. And you'll notice that my ruler is not slipping at all, and that's because I put that tape on there to give it some grip. So again, we have another perfectly cut out 3.5 by 6.5 unfinished flying geese unit. And look at this. From that one large square and 4 smaller squares, we ended up with 4 perfectly cut out flying geese units. How fantastic is that? And look at, this is all the waste. Hardly any waste at all. So this is a great method for being able to get perfectly trimmed up flying geese units with very little waste. And you too can accomplish this with the Wing Clipper ruler by Studio 180 Design. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this video on how to make 4 perfectly trimmed up flying geese units from 1 large piece of fabric and 4 small pieces of fabric. And if you've liked it, be sure to give the video a thumbs up, give it a heart, and subscribe so that you'll not miss any videos in the future. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.